Hola. Ok, solo un recordatorio, este webinario va a ser bilingüe, pero la presentadora va a concentrarse en inglés. Por mi parte, les comento que yo soy Mariana Correro, soy responsable de salas y estoy a cargo de la asistencia técnica para este webinario. Good morning, everyone. My name is Mariana Correro. I'm in charge of technical assistance for everyone on this webinar. Se trata del webinario 6 de la serie 2017 del Congreso de la quinta edición del Congreso de las Américas sobre Educación Internacional, la cual se llevará a cabo del 11 al 13 de octubre de 2017 en Montreal, en Quebec, Canadá. So this is the sixth webinar of our 2017 series of the Conference of the Americas on International Education. The next edition will be held on October 11th and 13th in the city of Quebec, of Montreal, in Canada. Para todos los interesados tenemos todavía, está todavía abierto el sistema de inscripciones, el cual pueden encontrar en el sitio web del Congreso. For everyone who is interested in registering to the conference, we still have our system open to new registrations at the website of the conference. Ahora cedo la palabra a mi colega Luis Caguachi. Now I pass the word to my colleague Luis Caguachi. Thank you very much. Gracias.
Buenas tardes. Muchas gracias, Mariana. Muchas gracias a todos. Espero me escuchen con claridad. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Welcome to the sixth webinar of the series in preparation for the Conference of the Americas in International Education. Today's webinar revolves around the notion of innovative educational models and how have universities created alternative ways to engage students in preparation for the future professional lives. So as we prepare for the Conference of the Americas on International Education, CAIE Canada 2017, which will take place here at Montreal this coming month of October, the Secretariat, in collaboration with Montreal's host universities, organizes a series of webinars with the purpose of opening conversations and promoting a dialogue among the various actors and future participants to the conference. For the universities, organizations, and specialists that participate in these virtual encounters, these webinars offer an invaluable platform to showcase their institutional strengths and flagship programs to an academic audience from all over the Americas. These are also relevant opportunities to address matters related to higher education, internationalization, research, and other avenues of collaboration available to all of us. Today's webinar will give us all an opportunity to learn about Concordia University, and particularly about District 3, one of the largest innovation hubs here in Montreal. District 3 is an incubator and accelerator based at Concordia University that offers programs and services to entrepreneurs, researchers, and students working not only on new projects and startups, but also with already established businesses to find innovative solutions to everyday challenges. It is worth mentioning that District 3 has been awarded the Startup Canada Entrepreneur Award for Quebec in 2016. So with that general information serving as context for today's presentation, I would now like to introduce you to Nora El-Bawab, General Manager and Coach of District 3. Welcome, Nora, and thank you for being here today.
Hi. Thank you for inviting me. Welcome everybody. I'm Noor. I'm the General Manager of District 3 and also a founding member of the center. So in a nutshell, we started District 3 about 4 years ago, And the idea was really to offer a space for ideas to come to life. Initially, it was focused specifically on entrepreneurs, and I'll explain a little bit later why. But it's at the core of its activities is entrepreneurs, because our motto is from idea to impact, and our three pillars are innovation, entrepreneurship, and collaboration. And innovation is really brought to the market when there is an entrepreneur willing to take the risk to get it there. So the idea behind bringing all these people together is because we believe at the core is that when different people with different skills have the resources that they need to take an idea forward, then this will bring a big impact in the world. And what better place to do this than in a university campus, considering all the knowledge, research, youth, and talent that exist in there. So we are first and foremost a community, and we're not just open to the Concordia University. And I guess that's what made a part of our success, is the fact that we are open to the entire Montreal community, because we do understand that knowledge can be different from one place to another, and the diversity in the different places coming together can be very, very valuable in a place like District 3. So our ecosystem, as we call it, it's confined of different players, right? So there's the researchers, obviously, who bring in the knowledge and their expertise in the different fields and subjects, such as synthetic biology, blockchain, all these new technologies that are taking over the world. And then there's the students that have the talent and the energy to learn something new, to figure out something new. Then there's the academics that accompany and mentor and coach and form our students and our future generation.
Nor, hi. I'm sorry to interrupt, but people are saying that they can't hear you properly. Could you please talk closer to your microphone, or probably a little higher?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Sorry to interrupt you. Thank you.
No
Bye.
problem. Yeah. So the government is there to support and to promote innovation as much as possible through financing, through the different programs that they offer to support the entrepreneurs. And at the core of it all is the entrepreneurs, because ultimately the entrepreneurs are the ones that bring the ideas to market. And in collaboration with industry, they're able to accelerate that process a lot faster. So, as I said before, we've been around for around 4 years, and in the 4 years, we've coached around 350 startups that have combined sales and financing of about 12 million, and a valuation of $50 million. Now, all this is not to brag, but it's essentially a testament that when people get together in one place under one rooftop, they can make things happen. And so we did this essentially by creating a community, right? By bringing people together. And when I say bringing people together, I don't know if you guys see it on the slide, but it's kind of hidden here. But we organize a lot of events. So that we have almost on a daily basis something happening here around the different themes that the entrepreneurs are interested in, be it user testing, marketing strategy, how to conduct interviews with customers, etc. And we've broken down their journey to make it easier into 4 or 5 simple steps. And when they come to see us, we try to evaluate how can we best bring the resources that they need to help them in each of these steps. So be it from ideation, customer validation, prototyping, customer acquisition. I'll go through each one of these. Each of these steps have similar, I would say, pains, and they require similar tools. So going around the world, ideation, we use a lot of the design thinking methodologies in there to help people that want to formulate the idea better or want to become entrepreneurs and don't know how to generate an idea to do that. And then once they do have an idea, we want to make sure that they know that they have customers out there. And so use the business model canvas from Steve Blank um, to push them to really talk to their customer, understand their customer as much as they can. And then once they have their first customers, then they move on to prototyping or the minimum viable product. And in there, they're taught to accelerate how they can bring a product to market in the fastest and easiest way possible. And then obviously, last step is to acquire and grow and maintain the customers that they've acquired. So these are in each of these programs, there is a fundamental thing that we offer, which is coaching. And the coaching is part of everything we do because it's by combining the young people with experience that things can start, that knowledge sharing can start to happen, right? So every startup is matched with a coach that follows up with them on a regular basis, either every week or every 2 weeks, to make sure that they're really heading to the right direction. And they set up goals for themselves, right? So we don't set the goals for them. They set their own goals every 90 days to make sure that they're advancing to the right direction. And the startups that we have, we've been criticized a lot around that because we don't necessarily focus specifically on big unicorn companies that are going to revolutionize social media or search engine or whatever that is. Because fundamentally, if we create many small companies that employ 10 employees each, then that's a huge value for our ecosystem and for our community, right? And we have a lot of companies that vary in sizes and vary in terms of what they develop and what they do. So for instance, Sensorial is developing a microchip, lab to analyze and test blood in instances. Or Cappies, on the other hand, they're a t-shirt printing company, but they've created a new model to accelerate their production. And that is now being viewed as a leader in this type of industry. And another example is Jotun. Jotun is a gaming company and is using state-of-the-art technology to develop their game in a very, very artistic way. And so once we started realizing that we have specifically focused on startup, again, because they are the ones that bring innovation to market, we started thinking, okay, so how can we involve students in this thinking? How can we involve more of the academia and our other stakeholders to make sure that they are involved in this innovation process? And this is where the innovation projects came into play. Now, the innovation projects, we started with it 3 years ago, but we brought it back to life this year. And the idea behind it was really to bring together all these players in the ecosystem that I've talked about in order to make innovation happen. And so the idea behind them was to create a work experience for students in a multidisciplinary fashion to emulate the real world industry, right? And providing them with a career opportunity that they wouldn't otherwise have thought of. So they're matched with experienced coaches, they're developing their portfolio, and they're really getting some hands-on experience with projects from industry. And so what they do gain out of this is the knowledge and the expertise that they need to move on in the fourth industrial revolution. So they can choose from a very diverse project themes, be it health, fintech, smart cities, sustainability, action sports, whatever it is, but they're really pushed to understand problems within each of these themes. And you can tell by the experience that they get is that they become transformed. They get transformed all throughout this project because it's one of the few opportunities that they have while in school to participate in a real project that a company will eventually implement in their operation, in their business. And the projects can vary in terms of technology that they use, in terms of needs that they have, in terms of the problems that they're trying to tackle. So, for instance, one of the projects we had this summer was around music therapy. and the idea of bringing music therapy to the homes of people. So instead of having to go to a specific center to get music therapy, it's a device, it's actually an instrument that allows people to practice music therapy wherever they are. And so that project came to us, and we had to assemble, obviously, a team of multidisciplinary students. Now you would think that this would only need an engineer and a designer, but it actually needs also a musician, an anthropologist, a psychologist to understand really the need of the problem and create a solution that is fit for that specific problem, right? And it's done, this specific project, as I'm explaining it, is done over 13 weeks, which is quite extraordinary when you think about it, to go from just an idea, just a concept, and then having a functional prototype that is potentially ready to raise money, go to the market, etc., within 3 months. And we've broken down this process into 3 specific steps. There is foundations, exploration, and creation. And in the foundation, the teams are taught very fundamental things that they don't necessarily have the opportunity. They think they have the opportunity to learn in school, but they don't always do. So team building, for instance, generally speaking, we are assigned to teams in school, but we don't necessarily have the right technique to form that bond with the team that will make us advance much faster and develop those skills that we need to make that project happen. Another aspect is storytelling and documentation. Although presentation is a prominent part of many business schools, but it's not necessarily part of engineering or other faculties. And so having students presenting every week and learning how to document the process becomes very, very important. And then they move on to exploration, where they start brainstorming about potential ideas and solutions that they can work on for the industry mandator. And then they explore 3 specific ideas to run with for the rest of the semester. And then 3 weeks or 4 weeks before the end of the semester, they have to select one and start the creation process, meaning iterating on their prototype and preparing themselves for the final exhibition. And throughout the 13 weeks, we had 6 teams developing projects for industry, and they've developed over 1,000 prototypes. Now, when I say prototype, I'm not saying a full functioning application or game or whatever it is. It's really just paper cut, simple tools that they use to validate with the customer directly. And these are not necessarily things that are intuitive for a lot of people. They're not necessarily intuitive for. So, but one example is one of the engineers that we had. He had this perception that the project is going to be all him, right? Because it's they have to build something. So obviously he's the electrical engineer, so he'll be the one doing everything. But then he soon realized that, well, he's not necessarily the best one documenting, because he never learned that necessarily, and he's not the best person storytelling. And so sharing the load of work between the students becomes very intuitive, and it helps them really develop their skills as team players and as leaders throughout those 13 weeks. And to sum it up, what they have achieved by the end of the 3 months is really tremendous, right? It's really amazing to think about 1,000 prototypes that are created over 3 months. So that's in a nutshell what District 3 does. Now, obviously, there's a lot of projects that we're developing still, that we're trying to build upon the stuff that we learned in the past and helping other universities develop their own innovation centers. But we know deep down that every ecosystem is different. Every environment is different. Our director here always says, if you give the same ingredients to an Italian and a French person, they won't make the same recipe. And it's the same thing here. We have the basic ingredients of the tools and knowledge and methodologies that can be used in different ecosystems, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be applied in the same way. So I'm gonna start opening up
Thank
to
you
take
very
any
much,
questions.
Nora.
If you guys have any,
Indeed, I'm
please
around to
send them
start up
over
the
to the chat, or I
conversation,
think
allow for it
Luis will
to
moderate
take
at this
place,
point.
allow for the participants as well to simmer. First, I would like to. I have a couple of questions on our side. First of all, let me thank you for allowing us to look at the inner workings and the processes of District 3. This is a very frank, open conversation that just allows us to look into the methodology, which has been very clearly outlined, and particularly understand what the contributions of the different stakeholders and players are to this process of innovation. As you may well know, you're also from elsewhere in Latin America, now in Canada, as I am. This is this prescient matter. This is something that is worrying our institutions abroad, and so we're all trying to push for development and innovation. Yeah. There is a concern as well about developing lifelong skills for the students, that we can, graduate them and after having had very little sleep, be able to survive in the professional world. And indeed, the experiential process of District 3 will allow for that toolbox for the rest of their lives. Some of the questions start to trickle in, but I would ask quickly, do you think there is a cultural element? Are some societies or communities more conducive, more welcoming for a development of a model or a mechanism such as yours, contrary to others? And I'm thinking about myself coming from Mexico, or in your case, coming from Brazil. What seems to be, because we can identify in our own communities all 6 of the stakeholders that you would identify, but is this really transferable elsewhere? Or is there a magic element that is particular to Montreal or Concordia or the environment? Is it cultural that makes this then a possibility?
Yeah, I hear you. I mean, it's definitely different. As I said, it's definitely different from one place to another, right? And the involvement of each of these stakeholders, I'm going to go up in the presentation. The involvement of each of these stakeholders can be different from one place to the other, right? So let's say, for instance, right now in Brazil, for instance, there's basically no government, right? So the involvement that they may have is very limited. But that doesn't stop the other members of the ecosystem to keep moving forward while the government catches up, right? So the involvement of each of these, although it is presented as equal in this chart, it is not particularly equal, right? As it doesn't matter where you are in the world, right? Like, as long as you put the end goal first, right? And by the end goal meaning innovation, that means entrepreneurs and students. Then you would have,
so you need to set the goal and then align whatever's available in order to reach
all
the
the
end
other
goal.
resources are lined up to have these 2 elements succeed. Exactly. And that's why I was saying that each ecosystem is different, right? But if you know what the end goal is, you essentially have to align everything else around it, regardless of what the resources you have. Right now, for instance, we always talk about how little resources there is in Africa, but Kenya right now is developing a very big startup and
Correct.
innovation ecosystem over there. And it's really fascinating to see them, with very few resources,
within their own
also
context
not
and their own
a lot of
realities
government
as well.
support, develop some real
There is
solutions to the people,
talking about these
to their own
the
communities
mix
and to their
and the
own
resources. There's a couple of questions that start coming up, and
Exactly.
they thread together and they touch upon the subject of funding for the project. Norma is mentioning that one of the most difficult elements to procure is precisely the funding for the project, and Catherine is asking how is this, Lucia then asks, how do students actually get funding for the projects themselves? Um, is there a segment of the industry or that seems to be easier or more conducive to produce projects as such? So, because it's a dual question in terms of the source of funding and which would be more favorable to engage.
Yeah. So yeah. So I'm going to talk in particular about the Canadian ecosystem. So the Canadian ecosystem, luckily, we have a government that really supports innovation, and there is a lot of funding available for it. So when it comes to finding money, depending on the project, right? The first thing we always ask the entrepreneurs to do is to find customers. Because if you don't have customers' money, then you don't have a business. So before they go ahead and start raising anything, they need to have a few customers lined up. And then, obviously the government support comes into play. We don't necessarily push them to the VC route or the venture capitalist route right away because it doesn't necessarily we don't live in the same environment as San Francisco, so we don't necessarily have access to that much VC money. And the VCs here are a little bit more conservative than they are over there, and therefore there needs to be a real value creation by the company, which is not necessarily a bad thing. It's actually a very good thing because it doesn't create the bubble that exists right now in the USA, right? So the kind of innovation that we fund is real innovation. They're real problem solving for real people. Therefore, there is real customers. And the money that is funded for it later on is
priority of
is used for good use.
A business model driven
Does that answer
approach
the question?
as opposed to an academic project coming out of the faculty itself. It's driven by the potential of success of the project itself. And then we graft the talent, as you mentioned, to make it then get to the end point, which is truly relevant about it. And now that we touch upon the academic element, Catherine is asking if the students that are involved with you, are they coming from different programs? Are they mainly business? You just talked about this music instrument, a music artifact for music therapy. So, what is the makeup of the student body involved in District 3? And how does this transfer into course credits, if any?
Yeah. So it's very diverse. They come from all walks of life. We have business students, we have engineering students, we have design, psychology, anthropology, all of it. You name it, we have it. So it's not necessarily mainly business. Business is one aspect of it. And it's not necessarily a course. It's the way we structured it is an internship that is paid by the mandator. So the mandator gives us a problem that they need to solve, and we gather a team of students that are paid to solve it. And the reason why we do that for this specific context is because when you put a student working towards a course or towards a credit, what they focus on is their A, right? Is their grade.
Correct.
So the involvement that they put is not necessarily the same as when they know, okay, this is a job, I'm paid for this, and I need to deliver something real. So that's how we structured it. Eventually, in the future, we hope to have a different format of this,
in terms of the motivations
that is
driving someone to engage in one sense
but it's
or
not,
the other.
not in the near future.
And in that sense, it makes sense that it is driven by the non-academic motivation to actually be involved in it, as opposed to delivering a grade.
Sure.
Which is, there's a question from Ilda regarding any projects that you could identify that touch upon sustainable development specifically, or that have had an impact on environment or sustainability.
Yeah, so we do. A few years ago, we decided that 25% of our companies are going to be social enterprises, meaning focus on sustainability and environment, etc. And we do have a few that come to mind.
Right.
They hold on. let me just try to find my words here to describe them. When you have 350 stars, trying to remember what each one does is kind of complicated. But yes, so there is one that focuses on food waste, because the problem of food waste is becoming more and more real in the world, and people are buying more food than they need, and in some places they don't have any. So they're trying to reduce that. And one of the things that they've discovered is the ugly fruit syndrome. I don't know if you've heard about this, but in the supermarkets here, at least in Canada, when you go to the supermarket, all the fruits and vegetables look perfectly beautiful. And so what ends up happening is actually, in reality, most of the ugly fruits and vegetables are thrown away. So what they're doing is that they're collecting those fruits and vegetables that are perfectly fine before they throw them away, and they're reselling them at a cheaper price. And so people that live in what they call here food deserts, so places that don't have any access to
Well, there is also
supermarkets
that notion
nearby,
that
or
when you start analyzing
they deliver
it,
them
you get the
online
perfect fruits
for
and
a very,
vegetables
very good
because they've
price.
been, they've
I
been
buy from
encouraged
them.
and
It's really cool.
sprayed and altered with, as opposed to having the actual natural fruit. So there's a trend to remarket our perception of our food based on the how clean and original it
Yep.
really is. So that's an interesting sort of approach to that, and an easy business model for that matter. Let's see, we have something else. Katrina is typing as we speak, so that would be interesting to
Yep.
see.
Yep, for sure.
Well, it seems that she had cleaned it up because she's typing again, so she might have been correcting us.
She may have changed her mind.
Here we go. Are the students working with industry right from the start when researching the problem they want to solve, or do the students then find the industry afterwards? So it's, is it from the beginning?
We match them together. So we match, from the beginning. So we find the industry
I guess
problem, and then
I
we
would want
match
to
the
ask.
students to that
I'm
problem.
pretty sure there's a lot of people.
So they're not the
As I
ones
said,
responsible
there's
for
a lot
finding
of
the problem or the industry.
institutions across the Americas that have some kind of a innovation spin-off capitalization park or industry park or something attached to the universities, and so, to each their own model based on their own contextual realities of the ecosystem. So, I mean, these are all relevant points because thinking personally about Mexico and as based on my experiences, there's just not that much of a motivation for businesses to risk engaging something or get involved in an innovation process. It's a cultural restriction. It's a cultural constraint. And
I mean, we're not that different here.
And how do you then?
It
How
takes a
how
lot
are
to
they
convince a
seduced or
company here
convinced to engage
to give a
carry on
project to be completed by students and to pay for it. However, so the imminent threat of technology is there, right? And
Correct.
we do have to raise awareness around that, right? Like one of our responsibilities is to raise awareness about the impact of artificial intelligence, around blockchain. And so when you're talking to small businesses who don't necessarily have their own internal R&D centers, or whatever that is, the risk of not taking action becomes a lot higher than taking action. So the amount of money that you're spending to develop something new, and potentially
being proactive instead of being waiting for the waves to take over you.
Is very valuable than just keeping with the flow.
Here's a very pertinent question, because it does touch upon something that is transnational if you want to think about it, and that's the ownership of the product or the end result.
Exactly.
Who takes ownership of the end result of this? What are the terms of agreement internally? proprietary.
Yeah. Yeah. So ultimately, is
Correct?
the owner of the idea is the person that paid for it. So it's the company that gave us that idea to begin with. But in certain instances, like for instance, 3 years ago, the company decided to instead create a company out of that project that came about, and that project became its own company. And so the Mandator
Correct.
became an investor. I don't know
Correct.
if I'm making myself clear, but somebody gave us a project, and then they decided they don't want to implement it in their own company.
So they became
They wanted to
investors
create a
now
spin-off
instead of
company
integrating
to
it
focus on
internally.
it.
They just became
And
a
they
spin-off
hired the
investors.
students as
Seed money and make it
entrepreneurs
happen as a parallel
to develop that
corporation.
company for them. Exactly. They become exactly. Yes, exactly.
Well, then here's a follow-up
Yeah,
question, I think, on that
exactly. So
sense.
it depends. It depends on the
And this
needs and
touches
wants
upon
and desires of
the
each
professors
different
themselves that are
mandator, right?
involved.
So it's
So
not
the faculty
a one
members that are
size
involved
fits
in the
all.
process as coaches or counselors. On one side, they're part of the academic body of the institution. So there's an intellectual property argument always when they're involved. And so
Yeah.
how does that play into the equation? And then there's a follow-up question regarding the faculty involvement, and they say if they're usually brought into the fold based on the needs of the project, or are faculty members themselves being motivated to bring their own interests into District 3?
It's a mix of all the above. So some of them are solicited by us, depending on the needs of the projects, and others have reached out to us submitting either their own project or wanting to work with one of the projects that we have. I mean, it's not each person is motivated by their own personal agendas, right? And some professors as well have their own agenda, be it testing some of their research with people, or developing something more concrete than an academic paper with the students. It varies very, very tremendously. But fundamentally, what we do seek them
Right.
for, at least to raise awareness about the existence of this opportunity to send their students there, is by involving them as coaches, right? As people that will guide the students
Which makes perfect sense. I mean, it's based on their own
the need
areas of
arises.
expertise, and then just facilitate
And so
them
they act as
moving
experts,
forward, consult,
essentially.
frame the production of these alternative solutions to the problems that are being presented
Yep.
to the students. And so that's, the theoretical framework is then provided and transferred down. Here's a question then: How is the business model for District 3? How is that? How are you compensated as
Yeah.
the big box that facilitates all of this?
So we're yeah. It's the same as any other incubator. I mean, it's a mix of university money, government money, sponsorship, philanthropists that gave us some money. I mentioned the government as well. So it's a mix of a lot of different things. Ultimately, everything we offer for the startups is free, and luckily we do have a space in the university. We do have a lot of resources that are offered here, so we're keeping our operation budget as low as possible. And most of the things that we pay for ultimately is
Right.
human resources, right? For the innovation projects,
And here's,
obviously,
I guess, a
because
follow-up
the
conversation in terms
mandators
of
pay,
follow-up question in terms
then
of
we end
faculty
up
involvement.
paying the students with that money,
If we
right?
were
So we're
thinking
not
about a given
necessarily keeping
project,
anything for us.
I would assume there's some kind of a structure in terms of order and who's responsible for that. We'll talk about the coaches. Is it mainly faculty members that are coaches to these teams? Is there always a faculty supervisor attached to the teams, or?
Yeah.
No, that's fine. I was just wondering if it was, if there's because we were discussing if it was an academic project or a
No,
work
so it's
project,
not
which is
yeah.
either or. It's actually an
Sorry,
internship
continue.
itself. So I guess the question comes from the side from Carol, comes from the side of saying, Is this an academically driven project assessment or project evaluation, or is this
Yeah.
how are the teams built? Who's heading this?
So the teams are built through our design thinking experts. So the supervisors and the facilitators, the trainers of this whole process are design thinking experts. They're not necessarily faculty supervisors. The faculty is only involved on a per need basis. So it's essentially it's the people that know how to animate the team, that animate the team and show them how to do it, and then they detach.
Right.
So as I showed the 3 steps for the innovation projects here, foundation, exploration, and creation. The instructors are very heavily involved in the 2 first steps, and then the teams are completely independent in the last one.
Now here's a question on
so
my
they
side.
they
This
do
is
have
just personal
supervision,
interest.
but it's mainly focused on the first 2 parts.
Are there any elements? I mean, there's some teaching methodologies that come to mind when I look at the process of this, and particularly project-based learning, which is a teaching methodology that's been applied tremendously in the Nordic countries, Northern Europe, that allows students to self-regulate in the delivery of a project itself. Are there any elements of this permeated through it, or or is this? Do you see it more as a work project itself, as opposed to, an academically structured with a specific teaching methodology behind it?
So it is very much inspired by the Nordic school thinking. As a matter of fact, a lot of this has been inspired by some schools in Copenhagen. So it is
Correct.
when it comes down to it, the methodologies that we use, we didn't reinvent the wheel on anything.
Correct.
We basically went around the world and explored what different places do and took the things that seemed to work the most, or to work the best, let's say. And so that's basically how we went about it. But we didn't really invent anything new, and we're not ashamed to admit that. What we did do that is new is bringing all these methodologies under one rooftop.
It's a playground for people
and
that
allowing
want to
people to
embark in
practice
some
them
creative
and
approaches to solution
play
building,
around
which
with
is
them, essentially.
which is motivating and it's encouraging, because we don't necessarily find this possibility when we finally embark in the professional world. And so by living this experience and having successful results, it may just ease out the tensions, future potential tensions in the marketplace, in the professional world, and bring about alternative approaches to problem solution, which is, I think it's, personally, I wished I had been in that.
Yeah.
It would have been me going through this as we speak. Different times, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, there we go. So Vilma
Yeah.
stresses
No, for sure.
the
I
point
do
that
wish
we're
that I
making
had that as
earlier
well. So
about the engagement of governments and industries and how to approach them and motivate them to be a part of this larger process.
yeah. Yeah, this is definitely a more complicated question because each industry and each country is different, right? And
Correct.
I know, for instance, I mean, in Brazil and southern countries, it's very much who knows who type of environment. So I can't necessarily answer this question unless I do have the knowledge on the terrain, understanding a little bit how they function or how they engage with each other. What's their biggest fear or pain, right? And it wasn't easy for us here either, right? Like the reason why it took us 3 years to launch this program is essentially to connect
and getting the vote of
with
confidence at the
those
end
industries, right? Like
to build
it's
this
not
ecosystem.
something that happens overnight.
Someone wants to contribute
It needs
to
a
the
lot
ecosystem
of
to actually be able to make it
digging
happen.
and understanding of what is it they need.
Well, unless there is any other questions
Exactly.
coming through.
Exactly.
Seems, let me just verify this.
Yeah.
Done, address this point, address this
Exactly.
point. Well, it seems like we're coming to a wrap up. And no, quite the contrary. Thank you for allowing us to look in through the window of District 3 in such a candid
Well,
way.
thank you so much for having
Congratulations
me.
on putting it together, making it happen, getting the cogs lined up so that the ecosystem can actually produce and provide. We invite our attendants to the webinar to please share this information with friends and colleagues. The session will be available for you for further consultation or reference if you need to. For all of those who will be attending the CAIE, you might consider thinking about paying a visit to District 3, or maybe around or your team to because it's interesting, and this is something that is so.
Yep. For sure. I was gonna say, if anybody has any questions later on that pops up, or
I personally
want
want
to visit, don't hesitate to shoot an email
taking the time. Thank
to
for the
us. I mean, we're very accessible.
to be
It's
part of this conversation. And I will allow then Mariana to just say some final closing remarks. Unless you have anything else to say, Nora, please do.
Okay, thank you, Luis. Thank you, Nora. This is Mariana Correro again. I thank you for attending this webinar, which was possible thanks to Alticia, a global player in mobile and flexible language learning solutions. They are sponsoring the CAIE to Canada 2017. And as I reminded you in the beginning, the 5th edition of this conference will be held in Montreal in October 11th to 13th. Thank you very much, and I will send to everyone the link of the presentation of this webinar and the YouTube video of the webinar along with the presentation. Thank you very much. Have a great day. Bye.